breakfast.
Good morning, and welcome to the Comics for Breakfast Valentine's Day Special. I'm your host, Jason MINK, and if you hadn't already guessed, today's episode is all about love. That's right. While I have about as much use for the subject as a second set of horns, I felt that there was some fertile ground just waiting to be explored when it came to the world of old comics. So let's not beat around the bush, but instead riddle it with the burning arrows of desire. Our first love connection concerns two DC Comics heroes, although it's none of the obvious contenders. We're talking the unlikely pairing of Rita Elastigirl Farr and Steve Mento Dayton in the pages of Doom Patrol number 104. This issue is written by Arnold Blake and illustrated by Bruno Premiani, and it's a corker. Let's go. Our story begins with Rita Elastigirl Farr unsuccessfully trying to get her Doom Patrol teammates to join her on a day out, but everyone is preoccupied with their own interests. Just when it looks like an afternoon of pizza rolls and Dragnet reruns, Rita is suddenly seized by a strange force that draws her up and out of Doom Patrol headquarters. The team race after her as she's quickly swept to her destination, stately Dayton Manor. Within, Steve Mento Dayton waits. He shows off his new power amplification device, which he's used to whisk our gal to his side. Rita seems unimpressed, but hey, you just know she's thinking about putting this guy to work mowing the lawn with his mind. Just then, Robot Man makes the scene and busts Mento's new machine up. Mento takes it personally, and the two really begin to go at it, with Robot Man getting the best of his foe. Rita intervenes, going as far as to step between her teammates. Hey, who do they think they are? Her big daddy? She's gonna stick around Mento's place, thank you very much. Her teammates leave in shock, stunned at this new turn of events. Mento takes this as a positive sign and goes in for a smooch, but Rita shuts him down. She'll let him know when she wants a kiss. Thank you very much. The patrol, meanwhile, just happen upon a bank robbery. Who needs a trouble alert when you can just tool around looking for action? They snag the offenders with ease, but the real sticky wicket waits back at HQ. Rita has returned, but she's still mighty salty over recent events. Still, that doesn't affect her performance, joining the team for a rescue operation. We get a cool sequence for new readers essentially running down everyone's powers and how the group interacts that in no way impacts the flow of the story. Arnold Drake was a real pro, providing an exciting, inventive, and overall fun script that keeps the reader invested. We catch up with Mento making like a trained seal at a high society shindig. An obviously sauced Tony Stark takes issue with the world's fifth richest man and throws a clumsy punch, missing Mento by a mile. Later that night, Mento whisks Rita away and proposes to her. And while she doesn't say yes, she also doesn't say no. So hey, still in the game, huh fellas? After thinking about it a bit and being jagged by her teammates and that, Rita decides to heck with it and agrees to marry Mento after all. This leads to one of the funniest panels I've seen in a while. Some expressive artwork from Bruno Premiani. Negative Man and Robot Man plot to ruin Rita's marriage with a sham letter designed to throw doubt on Mento's good intentions. Being the heroes that they are, they have a change of heart at the last moment and try and retrieve said letter, but it's too late. Rita gets a hold of the misleading missive, only instead of being angry, she's overjoyed. By plotting to ruin her happiness, the team shows that they truly care, and apparently that's all that matters. Dames, huh? I'll never figure 'em out. Ah, but it doesn't end there, my friends. There's a part 2 where things really get cooking. We pick up with a spurned Mento skulking around town. And wow, those newspapers sure get their headlines out fast. This poor bastard's still walking around in his tuxedo. Meanwhile, back at DP headquarters, the fellows try and fail to give Rita a case of the jollies. It seems only Mento knows how, and Rita's pretty much ruined that. Or has she? You see, Mento is nothing if not persistent. Hey, you don't get to become the world's 5th richest man by sitting on your hands. He has a fresh suit made and devises a new Mento helm with 5 times the strength as the last. Witness the power of the Fresh Maker. Later, Mento seemingly appears outside of DPHQ and calls them out. And naturally, the team respond. However, the villain actually manages to beat them this time. Rita appears and lays into her almost husband, but blam! Mento blinds his elastic love. Later, the chief examines Rita, but is uncertain he can reverse the blindness, while Mento laments his current fate. It's only then that we discover what's really happening. That wasn't Mento attacking the Doom Patrol at all, but instead the Brotherhood of Evil, whose shape-changing member, Madame Rogue, had impersonated Mento. The Brotherhood plans on pitting the two dynamic forces against each other, destroying all opposition in their plan for world domination. The chief manages to restore Rita's sight, and she rushes off to join the boys in battle, but something nags at the chief. He realizes the ray which blinded Rita could not have come from Mento, as it originated from beyond this world. Meanwhile, the two forces face off on a nearby bridge. And while the chief desperately tries to convince the team to stand down, heightened tempers get the best of the combatants, and before long, the train has completely gone off track. It's then the Brotherhood of Evil swoop in to pick up the pieces, but they didn't count on the chief and his action chair. With a little help from a nearby tree, Robot Man manages to limp into battle, turning the tide and sending the Brotherhood fleeing. With it clear Mento didn't blind Rita, it seems the marriage is back on, and before you can say, by the power invested in me by the Las Vegas Gaming Commission, these two are man and wife. Wow, and dig those super guests. They even managed to land super hip. What a get! But before the marriage can be, consummated, the bride rushes off to fight crime with her pals. It serves Mento right for wearing that thing on his head. Next up, we're heading over to Marvel Comics to witness the union of one of my favorite pairings, Hank and Janet Pym. And while these characters have been more or less dragged through the mud for the past several decades by, let's just say, less than sympathetic creators, at the time they were Marvel's kickiest couple. Oh, sure, Reed and Sue were married, but they weren't exactly a ball of laughs, if you know what I'm saying. I always felt the Pyms, despite their occasional hiccups, were a solid pair, and I found their adventures compelling. Today we're looking at the second half of the wedding story, which began way back in Avengers number 59, and we covered in Comics for Breakfast Season 1, Episode 16. Follow the link in the description below, or just jump in with both feet. The time is now! We pick up with Captain America receiving his invitation to the big wedding of Yellow Jacket and the Wasp. Cap is understandably shocked by this turn of events and quickly makes his way to Avengers Mansion, where a large crowd is formed. Cap works his way through the throng, making his way inside, where his teammates wait. And though the Star-Spangled Avenger expresses his confusion at the proceedings, he gets no real answer. Other than what this Yellow Jacket character has told them, his teammates are just as much in the dark as Cap is, and there's nothing to do for it but show up at the ceremony and smile. Just then the happy couple arrive in a funky contraption, courtesy of Yellow Jacket's skill and Jan's pocketbook. Considering Hank Pym built goofy crap like this in every other issue back then, and it's more than odd none of his teammates realize what's going on here. There's a bit of sniping, but Janet won't have it. Not on her special day. At the same time, Avengers butler Jarvis is attending the mansion's special guests. He seats the dubious Reverend, then rushes off to attend the caterers. Only, surprise, this wedding is being catered by the Circus of Crime, and the main course is the death of the Avengers. That's right. Tired of being blocked up by these costume clowns, Ringmaster and company decide their best course of action is to blow the entire mansion up with nitroglycerin. Unaware of the villainy occurring just beneath their noses, the Avengers ready themselves for the ceremony. Big John really knocks it out of the park with this illustration of Jan in her wedding dress, perfectly conveying her sense of pride and excitement. But just so you don't think we're covering Inside Wedding magazine here, we shift back to this great full-pager of the heroes mingling before the big do. There's booze, smokes, and telling tales out of school. But before we know it, Jan and Yellow Jacket are hitched. Disgusted by the proceedings, Hawkeye heads off to the kitchen for cake, but instead stumbles upon Ringmaster and his goons. And while the archer talks a big game, the Gambino brothers make short work of him. These circus folk are intense. The cake is wheeled out, and Jan is given Black Knight's sword to do the cutting. Just a replica, of course, considering the blood curse on the ebony blade and all. To the bride's surprise, her wedding cake has a venomy snake filling. Yowza! A stunned Jan is rescued from the snake by her teammates, who call off the proceedings. Having blown the deal for themselves, Ringmaster and the Circus of Crime attack. Why they didn't just plant that nitro and split never comes up. I guess these clowns just can't help themselves. A battle ensues, with the criminals actually holding their own for a few pages. Princess Python Snake manages to entangle the Wasp, leaving Yellow Jacket cowering in fear. But fear turns to rage, and the expected finally occurs, in a big way. Overcoming his honeymoon jitters, Pym finally gets big, saving the day. And while I'm not one to read into these sort of things, it's a pretty blatant metaphor, intentional or not. The Pyms were definitely kooky, but hey, they were our kooks. With the battle now more than even, it's just a matter of time before the Avengers put the bag on Ringmaster and his gang. In the end, all that's left is the cleanup, with Hawkeye arriving just in time. Grab a mop, Arrow boy. Jarvis ain't paid enough to deal with this. Pretty nutball stuff. Decades later, Marvel put out a miniseries explaining this storyline. The publisher was quick to point out that, of course, the other Avengers knew that this was Pym all along, and they simply played along to placate their mentally addled teammate. And while I understand the idea of not recognizing someone simply because they wore a different mask that day is kind of silly, let's think about this story. It's about a wedding crashed by circus-based supervillains. Why is credibility so important here all of a sudden? These sort of retcons suck all of the fun out of the experience, and I, for one, don't rate them at all. These are my Avengers. You can keep your do-overs. We're going to cap things off with another Marvel comic because, well, I couldn't think of another good wedding issue. That said, this one features Aunt May in one of her nuttiest appearances yet. How nutty? Almost 60% more than the fruitcake that she sent Peter for Christmas last year. This is a culmination of a storyline which sees May reconcile with former tenant and secret lover, Dr. Otto Octavius, who's convinced the elder Parker to marry him. Are you ready? Then swing with me, Sally. In the titanically titled My Uncle, My Enemy, Spider-Man arrives just in time to witness the unthinkable. Aunt May marrying his greatest nemesis? Sadly for old Petey, this is no ulcer-induced dream. The Parker matriarch is about to wed the diabolical Dr. Octopus, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Luckily, fate intervenes in the form of Hammerhead and his goons, who strafe the place with sleeping pellets. The best gangsters are considerate gangsters. After all, they're not out to kill anyone. They just want Aunt May, who's suddenly become a hot commodity. Ock rushes his bride-to-be to safety, while Spidey, I don't know what he's doing. Looking for a way in, I guess. He makes it to the front door just as May and Otto do. In spite of this being his greatest enemy, Spidey keeps forgetting Doc Ock has 6 arms he needs to fight. Actually, it's 8 if you count his real arms, but hey, Webhead has enough trouble without my busting his chops over semantics. He hangs back to observe his foe's next move, and it's a doozy. Ock has his own jet-powered escape copter just waiting. At the time, only he and Elton John had them, so Spidey is danged impressed. So impressed, he doesn't do anything when they fly away, other than hide behind a shrub. Eventually nudged by the writer to make a move, Spidey catches a ride with Hammerhead and follows Doc's copter. For a bit of comic relief, we cut to a party where J. Jonah Jameson bores the guests. Mary Jane and the others, off to one side, wonder where Peter is. I'm not sure why. If history is any indication, this kid won't show up for his own funeral, but they wonder anyway. If only they knew. He was hanging off a helicopter on its way to Canada. Spider powers or not, that's a long distance to hang on to an airborne vehicle. And they're not just headed to Quebec for a scone, but instead an isolated island occupied by the most modern, privately owned nuclear power plant in the world. This is the terrible secret. May has inherited the power plant, a plant that, in the wrong hands, or tentacles, could threaten the world. The newlyweds pile out of the copter into the frigid Canadian air, and Doc Ock demands one of his lackeys fetch his lady a coat. See? Chivalry isn't dead. It just smells funny. Just then, Hammerhead's helicopter arrives, opening fire on the elderly couple. Finally motivated to get involved, Spidey springs from his hiding place and begins bopping the gunsels. He tries to rescue May, but Ock rebukes him. He's come this far, and won't be thwarted by some puny insect. The two go at it in typical fashion, and points to Ock. He's holding his own in spite of sporting a tuxedo. Still, you don't mess with a guy's aunt no matter how stylish you are, and Spidey beats his foe down with a rarely seen savagery. The shock causes May to black out, but Spidey provides a quick save thanks to a web cushion. He snags his unconscious aunt and swings off to escape the massed forces. Both Ock and Hammerhead follow, but are too late. Spidey, who apparently knows how to fly a jet now, blasts off, leaving his foes behind. And boy, are they in a pickle. The reactor has gone critical and requires quick thinking to stop it. Only Hammerhead isn't exactly known for being an intellectual, and he charges. Moments later, the island is incinerated in an atomic explosion, the likes of which would most likely pollute the entire eastern seaboard, but instead is just sort of forgotten about after this issue. We wrap on this nice little back and forth between Spidey and May, who passes out from the shock. So much for wedded bliss. Wait a minute. Story wasn't about love at all. Well, unless you consider nuclear fission a form of love. Hey, who am I to judge how two molecules react in the privacy of their own home? Poor old Aunt May would remain single for the foreseeable future, although I wouldn't count her out just yet. She cleans up pretty nicely these days. Thank you for joining us on this special Valentine's Day edition of Comics for Breakfast. You can show your love for what we do here by throwing a few bucks and the old guys who like old comics tip hat. Every shekel goes towards creating the kind of content that you can only find here on the Old Guys Who Like Old Comics Network. I'm your host, Jason MINK, and I hope to see you next week at breakfast.